Now, let's turn to the next page in your handout. On the top of the page, it should say effect of a price discount. Everybody see that page? So what we've put together here is an Excel spreadsheet that looks at the impact of both a price discount and a price increase. Now, how often are you thinking about either lowering your price or maybe even raising your price? So we look at this, let's look at the top half, the effect of a price discount, and let's look at an example. Let's just assume on the x-axis, horizontal axis, you see different levels of gross margin. So let's just assume that we're operating at 30% gross margin, that your company operates at 30% gross margin, meaning if you sell something for $1, you get 30 cents in gross profit. 30% gross margin. And let's assume that we're thinking about a 10% price discount. 10% price discount. So what we're going to find is what is the percentage increase in our sales that will be required to maintain the same 30% gross profit after a 10% price discount. So we put our finger on 10% on the left-hand side. We work our way across to 30% gross margin. And what do we find? We've got to sell 50% more product at 30% gross margin to make up for that 10% price discount. Wow. So if you're selling 100 products a day, you now need to sell 150 products a day if you decide to lower your price 10% at a 30% gross margin. That's a lot. 50% is a lot of extra product. Let's look at a second example. Let's say we're going to stay at a 30% gross margin. How about a 5% price discount? 5% price discount. How much more will we have to sell? Luis, how much more will we have to sell with a 5% price discount?
We have to sell 20% more.
Correct. We're going to have to sell even a 5%. That seems like a very small discount. At 30% gross margin, we're going to have to sell 20% more sales volume to make up for that 5% discount. So I want you to keep this handy, because the next time you're thinking about lowering your price, whether it's across the board a price discount or maybe just for one particular customer, I want you to look to see how much more you're going to have to sell at that price discount. Now, the bottom chart looks at the impact of a price increase. What percentage drop in sales can be sustained to maintain the same gross profit after a price increase? So let's look at an example. Let's assume again we're operating at a 30% gross margin. So put your finger on 30% gross margin. Let's look at a 10% price increase. 10% price increase. Margarita, how much more or how much less can we afford to sell and stay and maintain our 30% gross margin?
75.
25% is correct. 10% price increase, we can afford to sell 25% less than we did before and still maintain the same profit, the same gross profit. Everybody see how we found that? Yeah. So again, as you're making pricing decisions, either raising prices or lowering prices, I want you to use this chart. First of all, you have to know what is your gross profit margin. And each of you should know that. Are we 50%, 40%, 60% gross margin? And then as you're making pricing decisions, I want you to use this spreadsheet to determine how much business either you're going to have to make up, or how much with a price decrease, or how much business you can afford to lose with a price increase. Okay? So if you're curious, how did we arrive at this math? If you turn, I think it's the next page in your handout, it explains the math behind that chart. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here for a moment.